So I just recently got my pre-ordered copy of Gundam Breaker delivered, and I played an hour and a half of it. I was planning on doing a bunch of gameplay footage because Gundam Breaker has always been a really great series, and I thought for sure this would be a game worthy of a lot of footage. That is not going to happen. Instead, you're going to get this very short emergency review with no video. You're just going to get a cover art of the game you shouldn't get ever. And because quite frankly, I'm not going to set up the capture card. I'm not going to record footage for this game. It does not deserve that much time put into it. This game is awful. It's embarrassingly bad. Like it's one of only 3 times I've ever been this depressed and disappointed with a game. And it's for the same reason as the other two. The game had so much potential because of its previous games. Gundam Breaker 1 through 3 are amazing. Number 3 is honestly a masterpiece in my opinion. It's probably one of my top 20 favorite games of all time. And this new Gundam Breaker, that's the title, New Gundam Breaker, is not worthy of being anyway a sequel of this game. And there's 4 main things why it's terrible, and I'll get into those. Number 1 is kind of 2 reasons combined. It's very clearly not polished, and the gameplay is terrible. Your mech is very, very, very sluggish. And I'll back up and do a little bit of a background on the Gundam Breaker series. In the Gundam Breaker series, you kind of play as the model kits, and it's very Armored Core like because you mix and match parts and recombine elements, and they have different stats and abilities and what have you. But it plays like Dynasty Warriors, kind of. It's a Dynasty Warriors light, where you're fighting through mobs of enemies and you got different special attacks you can do. It's really fun, and it's really great because you can do so much customization and detailing on your mechs, and it's almost like replacement for having the model kits themselves. It's much cheaper too, and more fun because you get a battle with them. Okay, in the previous games, you could do like quick dashes, move cancels. When you were knocked on the ground, you were able to get right back up, within a couple frames. You honestly forgot that you were playing as a model kit or a mech. You felt like you were playing as, a Dynasty Warriors character. That's no longer present. In fact, there's no dashing, and when you get knocked on the ground, you're usually stuck there for a while until you can get back up. Now, this is one-sided. You can get slapped around like crazy while you're on the ground, but the enemy can't, because as soon as the enemy drops, it's got like maybe 3 seconds where it's invincible. Now, that might seem, okay, well, that's fair. No, in the prior games, the enemy would be able to get right back up, so you could utilize those couple seconds where it was on the ground to wail on it. It was kind of fair that way. And the same with you. It would slap you around, but you could get up too if you were paying attention and you were quick enough. So, and the game's very, very slow. It feels just so hard to move, and it's not as intuitive with your movements. Locking on is a damn nightmare. Like, it used to be able to just use the R stick to switch your targets really quick. This one, I almost felt like I needed to grip the R3 stick with my whole hand and just move it in the direction I wanted to. Not good. And the game just has a very, very bad polish to it. It lags like crazy. On a single-player game offline, it lags. There's no excuse for that. And there's even freezing. Like momentary, 3-second freezing. That, again, not online. Unacceptable. Things don't render in right away. Like the little launch sequence with your mech. It just kind of appears in the frame. No, it looks terrible. It's very clearly unpolished in terms of its gameplay and in terms of, its graphic engines when it loads things in and what have you. The second main issue is EX actions. EX actions are kind of like your special attacks. You got ones where you can shoot like a beam salvo or do like a flurry of high-speed sword slices and what have you. And then there's also very specific ones to mech parts. For example, the Heavy Arms Gundam and the Thunderbolt Gundam have a full salvo attack where they just fire every single weapon on their model, in keeping with the universe theme of those series. Or you got ones like the Death Scythe can go cloaked or what have you. Now, in New Gundam Breaker, those special abilities are preset to what parts you have and your frame that you're using. Now, that might seem like, well, yeah, that'd be fair or balanced or whatever, but in the previous games, again, we'll go back to Heavy Arms Gundam, you could unlock that special EX to use in any of your 4 spots that you could select any special for of the ones that you had available. But you'd have to use that heavy arms one for a while to get that stat or that ability maxed out. After that was done, you could use that ability for any part. Now, why that was super great was because because the ability was to just fire off all your weapons. Well, that'd be great if you could use whichever design or mech design you want and just have them fire off all weapons. It's not cheating because you're not materializing extra attacks. You're just using your attack you've got, sort of. So it was really fun because you could, like, for example, with the stealth ability, I made a ninja suit and I just gave it the ability to cloak. It had no parts that would enable that in universe, but because I was able to unlock that skill, I could use that. This made the very process of building mechs very, very fun, and you could be creative with them and make just novel designs with abilities that don't really structurally make sense with the parts in universe, and it was more fun. And so that's been completely removed. You have to use only the specials that are with the parts that you have. And why that's really a burr in my saddle is because it kind of creates like the Chrome Hound effect, which is from the game Chrome Hounds, where you've got all this limitless possibilities and whatnot, but you're only really going to see a couple designs because people will eventually figure out what parts work best. And then there's no creativity, there's no unique designs anymore because you can't use the abilities across parts. So that's unacceptable. I hate that. Number 3, there's these things called builder's parts, and these were incorporated in the third game. Builder's parts were just extra things that you could attach to your mech that weren't part of just the raw design. For example, you could have like a shoulder-mounted Gatling gun, or you could have extra boosters on your back, or just cosmetic stuff, or like a sword on your hip, or rail guns on your shoulders, or whatever. And they were from other mechs. They were just kind of like, like for example, the rail gun that's on the Strike Freedom. It would just have that same railgun, and you could just put it on your mech. Now, this was really cool because you could use those weapons as auxiliary attacks. You could, I think it was like D-pad to select your other abilities, and you could just pull out that sword that you had bolted on your shoulder or on your side, and you could just swing it around like crazy. And it was like a preset attack you could do with that. Or you could have a missile pod, and you could just shoot out a missile salvo. Now, this was really cool when combined with the EX actions. For example, that full salvo attack that I mentioned. If you put on like 60 missile, well, not really, you couldn't really do that. You put like 4 or 5 missile pods on you, and then you activate that, all those pods are going to fire. And that was really cool, and it made your mechs feel more realistic or more unique. You didn't just have these props bolted to you. They actually could do something. They could actually fire out weapons. And in many ways, this made mechs kind of a little bit more balanced because, like, for example, in universe, Azaku isn't going to really do much to a Gundam. But if you have all these hand grenades and flashbangs and discs and whatnot attached to it, it could just be throwing out like a nonstop stream of attacks. Now, they weren't really that damaging, but it was kind of fun to be able to chuck grenades at people. But that ability is removed in New Gundam Breaker. You can still have the parts, but they no longer incorporate any special attacks. Instead, what they do is give you stat bonuses. For example, like a missile pod will give you +1 attack but decrease your speed. That's lame as shit. That's just terrible because it does the exact opposite. It makes your parts fairly meaningless. Like you just got this missile pod attached to you that doesn't actually really do anything. It might as well just be. They might as well not even be there. I mean, sure, they have the appearance of an upgrade, or they've got, like, oh, look, I got this missile pod on my mech that I, designed myself, but it doesn't do anything. It's worthless. So that's a big issue, and it removed quite a bit of the fun because I was able to make like beam mechs that just had so many different energy cannons and whatnot. Fourth big problem with this game is that the ability to get parts is severely diminished compared to previous games. You've got, and this is part of a new system that's absolutely worthless, and I have no idea why it was included. It sounds really cool until you think about it for 2 seconds, and that's where you've got 5 little opening sockets, and you can pick up parts from enemy mechs that drop, and you can switch out in battle. That sounds cool until, again, you think about it for a couple seconds. These parts aren't painted. They don't match your mech. It often just looks janky and awful. and it doesn't really add anything. It doesn't incorporate any real new strategy. You think, oh, I picked up a machine gun, I can use a machine gun. There's really not a whole lot of difference between the weapons. And so just being able to pick up new arms, I got new arms, that doesn't mean anything. If you finish the game with all those, if you finish the match, you get those parts that were in your bank. 5 parts. Now you can get more than that, and there's in-mission bins, like little collector bins, and you can dump your parts that you collected in there and just go get some more, and you could just keep cycling and doing this process. That's terrible. That ruins gameplay, because then you have to do all this part maintenance where you got to go and take parts back and do all that. In the previous games, you just picked them up and they would just be in your inventory, and then at the end of the match you get the parts that you collected. So you could walk away from matches with like 30 odd parts. The most I've gotten so far, and I just had to just focus entirely on collecting parts the whole mission, dragging them back to the bin and collecting them, was about 19. Again, that's unacceptable because I had to dedicate myself to that. Whereas just, flying around in the previous ones, I was just able to get 30 or so. And 30 is like maybe on the lighter end. You could walk away with a lot more. And so this is supposed to be this 3-on-3 dynamic. Well, half the game you're taking stuff to the bin. It's not fun. It used to be like freaking Chuck E. Cheese. I just had these rolls of tickets after each match, tickets being parts. And it took forever to grind for good parts that you wanted in the previous games. But it was still fun because you got 9 tries at a part. You get the same rifle 9 times. Okay, are any of these the good ones? No, they're all garbage. Okay, well, let's try again. We'll try again with another 9. It becomes so much harder to grind for the parts you want, to a point where it's like, I don't even want to approach that. It's just too annoying. Now, those are the 4 main things. There's a bunch of other problems with the game. For example, you used to be able to upgrade your weapons and parts to an upteenth degree. Like, you could do so much customization on your internal components, internal parts. This one had ice damage. This one had, this one does a solid beam as its secondary attack. This one does a machine beam as its secondary attack. You had all these massive amounts of customization you could do in the third game. All of that's gone. Every bit of it. Painting is much jankier. It used to be you could select all the colors of a certain hue and change all of them together at once. You can't do that anymore. And while that might not seem that important, it was just so much quicker and easier to do what you wanted to do in customization that way. Can't do that anymore. The game, kind of going back to the first point, takes so long to load stuff in, and it's unacceptable. The first couple 3, while they paused for a while, they were able to move pretty quickly. It's terrible. I keep saying it, and I want my emotion to be captured in my voice with how frustrated I am. And I think I've figured out the reason for a lot of these failings. And that's because the game transitioned to a multiplayer format. They wanted to do 3-on-3 online. Oh, hold on. Before I get to that, there's another feature that was removed. There was a bounty hunter mode in the third game where just either random generated or previous people who have designed mechs will appear in a bounty hunter queue, and you could fight those mechs and try and get those exact parts. Made it so much easier to grind for. I mean, you still had to fight the guy maybe 8 times before you got the part you wanted, but you knew you were going to get parts from that mech. That feature is gone. Not in the game anymore. But I was going to say the multiplayer aspect. It was very clear that they were trying to balance the game. And you've got these things called internal frames, which are kind of like a class system. You've got 6 different frames. One of them's like a general spec. One of them's, long, like a bruiser. One of them's faster but doesn't have a lot of skills. You got these different class systems. And then you build on top of those. That's fine. Actually, it would have been just fine if they would have taken Gundam Breaker 3 and incorporated that frame system and then just had that and have it be a class system with that. But they made the parts so meaningless, and all of it reeks of balance. Now you can't choose your abilities. You got to stay within the realm of what parts you've selected. And I sound like I'm whining, like, well, duh, that creates a balance. No, what that does is just makes the game boring. Because then people are going to be forced to use just whatever parts are going to win, and not what designs they put their energy and love into. It becomes a Chrome Hounds effect where everyone's just going to end up using the same mech designs because people are going to figure out which ones are the best. And honestly, that's fine if like they all function the same. I wouldn't give a crap. I want to be able to see something different. I don't want to see 60 of the same mech with just different paint jobs. That's lame. And it's very clear the ability, they slowed it down so that people can play easier. Okay, well, that's lame. Look at Armored Core 4. That game's super fast. You got to be fast to play that game. You can make multiplayer games that require skill of that degree of speed. The builder's parts, it was very clear they just wanted to give it stat boost. They want to have a person shooting out endless streams of ammunition. What I see as the problem is that actually anarchy itself in Gundam Breaker would have created a balance. But I guess I'm wrong about that. I have not been this disappointed in a game in a long time. Because if you go, it should never. This is such a basic rule in video games that it's embarrassing that this was violated. And you almost never need to bring up this rule. And that's that a game should never have less than the game before it. And that can be, kind of subjective, but it's definitely like if you're going to a next generation console and you're building in a game, you can have less content, but you have that boost of extra graphics, extra power, all that. So you're not really losing out on something. It's still possibly equal or more, even if it's got less content. But this game had no excuse. Both it and Gundam Breaker 3 are for the PlayStation 4. They're all in the same generation. So there's no reason whatsoever it shouldn't have been more than Gundam Breaker 3. It is so embarrassingly less. I was getting constantly frustrated with why can't I do this thing? Why can't I do this? It was available in Gundam Breaker 3. Why can't I do that? And it was getting to where I could count it on. And once I was exceeding one hand of things, why weren't these available? I was losing interest. And honestly, a lot of these things might be available later on in the game. I doubt it. But actually, I'm pretty much positive a lot of these things aren't available later on in the game. But things like Bounty Hunter mode, if it became available later on in the game, okay, that's cool. But what about all the other stuff that's unacceptably absent? And they added some new mechs, but what does it matter? What does it matter? Because they're not fun. I'm not having fun with the game. The previous games were so thrilling. Just right off the get-go, I'm having a good time. I'm getting cool build parts. Usually they're not the ones I want, but I'm like getting some cool stuff. I can mix and match. I mix this weird-ass mech that's just kind of a beginner one, and I'm using different abilities that I'm finding. No. It just feels like I'm just slogging through nonsense. And I haven't been this disappointed in the game since Ninja Gaiden 3. And prior to that, since Saints Row the Third. Both of those games are the previous games, Ninja Gaiden 2 and Saints Row 2, are games that I absolutely love, and whose sequels were just shit the bed so bad that I was honestly up for quite a bit of the night wondering, how did this happen? And that's something I keep thinking with new Gundam Breaker is people had to have seen this. But they rationalized that it was okay. How can they look at how much was available in the prior game, how much they removed, and say, yeah, this is okay. This is good. No. So, you're not going to expect any Gundam Breaker footage from me for a while. I'm going to check back in. I'm done playing it. That 2 hours that I played, that's enough. That was maybe an hour and 45 minutes more than it really deserved. I will say one positive thing about the game, and that's the story is actually pretty interesting. And it's kind of cliche, I get it, but it kind of reminded me of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. It was kind of funny. You're in this Gunpla Academy, and the student council are evil and nefarious, and you've got to team up to try and take them down. And the only way they respect, and that's Gunpla battles. I admit the story was kind of fun. It had a little quirkiness, and I liked it. But no, not enough to actually keep me engaged. It's just too bad. And I will probably check in with the game in about 4 months because they said they're going to do regular updates and new models and whatnot. Oh, that's something that's pretty funny that I should have taken this into consideration when I read it. They didn't incorporate all the models that they had from Gundam Breaker 3 into this game yet. They said they plan to bring them all in later because they didn't want to overwhelm players. Oh, you certainly didn't overwhelm me. I was very underwhelmed. I couldn't have possibly been less overwhelmed. You succeeded. They definitely won on that front. They were able to accomplish that goal. So we'll see how the game goes in 4 months. I have no interest in playing it until then, and even then I'll probably have to really convince myself. So yeah, that was just an emergency review I had to do for this game. It's just bad. If you want to play a really fun Gundam game, order yourself Gundam Breaker 3. Get the one that's for the Southeast Asia version, because that has full English subtitles. You can understand everything. It's an incredibly fun experience. If they just would have maybe released that in America, everything would have been great. But they didn't. They instead released New Gundam Breaker, which is just a train wreck. So, but I do recommend getting Gundam Breaker 3. Like I said, it's one of my top 20 favorite games of all time. Absolutely wonderful game. New Gundam, well, we'll see in 4 months. Okay, I'm just talking in circles now, so that's all. Try harder next time, Bandai. Please try harder. Because I'm worried that this is going to go exactly like Gundam Crossfire, which was one of the last Gundam games the West had until we had this Gundam embargo. And the game was terrible. Or not even terrible, it just wasn't good. And then Japan, Bandai, got the news that we didn't buy a lot of that game and figured, I guess America doesn't like Gundam games. No, we like good Gundam games. People like good Gundam games. Send us good ones. Please stop headlining with garbage. Try harder, Bandai. And for all of you, just don't buy it.